midweek routine and get answers to all Pleasure Pulse every Tuesday night from 8 to 9 p.m. This Tuesday with Roma as your guide.
Tonight for another but as usual, before we get into tonight's discussion, I'd like to give you all a little minute or less to let people know that Pleasure Pulse is on now, and you can tune into us on radio, on YouTube, and I believe on Facebook as well, on ZIZ, on ZIZ's pages or accounts on those sites. So we'll take a short break and come back and then get into tonight's discussion. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Pleasure Pulse. I'm your host, Roma Richardson, and you are joining me another Tuesday night, another conversation about sex. And tonight we are talking about sex and work. And I chose this topic. I mean, it was kind of just on my mind to talk about. And I decided to title it like this to confuse people. I was like, sex and work in brackets, life balance, and so on. But at some point, we will talk about sex work. Mm-hmm. Tonight is not that point, but at some point, we will do that. So before I get into my discussions and before we get into tonight's conversation, I want to allow my guest to introduce herself, tell everybody anything you want them to know about you.
Okay, good night to everyone. My name is Andrea Watley, no stranger to Pleasure Pulse, mental health counselor at 3C's Counseling Services, and I'm also an HR professional. So speaking about sex and work tonight is on point. So thank you, Roma, for inviting me again, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you for agreeing to come. You know, I'm always like, sometimes the topics that pop into my head or that the connections that I want to make or that I see and would like to talk about, and always I can't always find somebody to talk to them. So I was happy that, you know, you were in my community, somebody that I could reach out to now in the HR space conveniently, luckily for me. Yeah. So I was happy that you accepted the invitation. And is this something that you've just generally, you know, thought about before, sex and work? I mean, I know there are conversations around sexual harassment and things like that, and I'm taking kind of a different route in that conversation. So not to talk about sex at work.
Yeah. We seldom hear about sex and work in the same phrase. You know, they don't coexist when it comes to us having those conversations. Nonetheless, it is something that is talked about, but not talked about openly. And usually it's an isolated situation. So it's either or, but never together. But they are very much connected. They're interconnected. Yeah. You know, so when we talk about sex and we talk about pleasure, it's important for us to understand what pleasure is. So that's part of the conversation that we're going to talk about.
Okay. It's interesting because I was invited once to a workplace to talk about sex. And I think more workplaces can be spaces where we have conversations about, you know, these topics, because people at work are not suddenly all devoid of sexuality or, you know, removed from being sexual beings. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting getting into tonight's discussion. So you are now deep in the HR space, right?
Correct.
The last times you were here more as a mental health counselor.
Correct.
Do you have a lot of parenting or partnered adults come to you about struggling with their work-life balance, which is why I thought about like sex and work in general. But do you have that come up?
Within the workspace, you usually hear employees speak about burnout, or they're not able to balance their lives. You know, they're just overwhelmed with so many different things. But in those conversations, we don't directly go to the intimate parts of their lives. We speak more so of the surface level stuff, whether it's too much work, the workload is enough, they don't have enough money, that sort of thing. But in reality, if we dive deeper into the conversations, we recognize that relationships are being affected. Some of them who are single parents, they are being affected. So getting down to the sex conversations is seldom happens within the workspace.
Yeah.
But within the counseling space now, where they feel more safe to basically void themselves of all that information, they share openly how they are not able to enjoy pleasure as they would like. And I think too sometimes it comes across as something shameful for them to actually say, hey, I'm not enjoying, I'm lacking joy in my life, basically. And I think too that there's a misconception that when we speak about pleasure, it only refers to sex. That is not so. It's not just the sexual act. It could be you find pleasure in other things. You find pleasure in what you do. You find purpose in what you do, and that is pleasurable. You find pleasure spiritually. You find pleasure when it comes to being a social butterfly. So there are different ways that persons seek pleasure, enjoy pleasure, but because of work, we recognize that work is taking up more time than before. So when we talk about work-life balance, it seems non-existent. And we must see work and pleasure as a marriage. In a marriage, it's not all the time 50-50. Sometimes you have 80-20, sometimes you have 90-10, sometimes you have 95-5.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with work and sex, work and pleasure. There must be a time where you work out, okay, at this time, I have to put in the work. And so pleasure is now, at the 5%. Or you may be at a place where you can say, okay, now it's half-half. I'm at that place in my life where I can balance both. But it's not all the time that we can balance it. And that's the reality. That is something that we must accept, that we can't balance it. We have to work with it. There are different times where work demands more, pleasure demands more. Like, for example, you're going on a vacation. The vacation taking up 80%, and work might not even be on your mind at that time.
I hope not. But I mean, sometimes some people can't fully disengage. And that
is another conversation, because then it means that we've allowed work to consume us. There's a saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And pleasure is important to our wellness. We cannot exclude it. Some persons, as I said before, some persons find pleasure in different things. It's important that you identify what you find pleasure in, because it's what you find pleasure in will restore you, will revive you, will re-energize you basically to go out and do the work.
Do you think there's ever a time when work could be 5% and pleasure is 95% and you still keep the job?
Well, okay. So with that part now, it's important for us to first be able to find pleasure in work. So that when it's time now for us to leave work, we are so familiar with pleasure. We are so familiar with being joyful, with being happy, that it's not foreign to us, because sometimes persons who take a break from work do feel guilty. They feel as though they're cheating on work because they're having too much fun, and that should not be the case. That shows that there's definitely a deficit for you. So when it comes to work, when it comes within the HR space, we speak to sexual harassment policies. There are EAPs, employee assistance program. There's a DEI for embracing other sexualities, etc. But we don't speak to the sexual needs of persons. Hence, the sexual harassments happen as well because persons don't know or don't understand what are some of the limitations when it comes to engaging other employees. You have your issues and you need to deal with it. So access EAP, so these are things that definitely needs more exploration. Some workplaces also encourage sexual education, even when it comes to creating awareness about different STDs, especially around different festive seasons, where you want to keep your workers healthy. So you educate them as much as possible. But actual conversations about your sexuality, your sexual experiences is not really a part in the workspace.
Right. And I could imagine that, that's not something that's necessarily, unless you are a workspace that is in the sexuality, sexual education space itself, right?
Correct.
Like, I can imagine that you might now and again bring in somebody from outside to speak
have those
to those
conversations.
but then, like, maybe you want something that's more regular, that's more consistent, that doesn't really, happen. But that's also me putting a plug out there for anybody who wants to invite me into their workplace. I can help to facilitate these conversations. And I also have a hot take. I don't know if it's a hot take. I think sometimes I don't believe in work-life balance. I think work is a part of life.
Correct.
Work and life are not on equal footing. Is just that work has been elevated as the thing, or established as the thing that is required to help us find enjoyment in life. So work gives you access, work gives you money, and you need money to be able to enjoy things, but you can find joy in
other things,
which is a conversation for another time. But that was just so okay, so you are an HR professional now, but you are also a wife, you are also a mother, you are many things, outside of work, but you are also a working woman.
Yes.
So as a working woman, how have you found time for pleasure?
So, the question is, have I found time?
Okay. I don't like to ask yes or no
because
questions.
The reality is, for me, as a working woman, I'm also a working mother. So those two, that's three. Those are three areas right there that it's very hard for me to separate at any given point in time. Because if I say, okay, I'm just a working woman, then it means it's all about work. But then what happens to the children, right? What happens to my own personal needs? So for me, I find pleasure first in what I'm doing. It starts there for me. And the reason for that is because in what I'm doing, I feel I get that sense of self-actualization, like I'm being purposeful, I'm being useful. And so it starts there for me. After I leave that space and I'm transitioning now into the space of motherhood, because after I leave work, I'm going home to be a mother, I try my best to be happy in that space. And then after dealing with the children, then I'm the wife. So I have to make time for my husband. And that for me is the pinnacle of my day, that alone time, that night. Well, most is in the night because the day ends. But it's when we get to be alone, that quiet time when I can just be authentically myself around him. That in itself brings me pleasure, because nobody can take off the mask of being at work and being good with everybody. I can take off the mask of just being the safe space for the children, but I can be myself there around him. So I try my best to make time at nights. That's when I get to regroup. Intimacy part, that comes, but for me, it's having that quiet time. Sometimes too, if I need it quickly, I jump in my Jeep and I shut the door, and I'm not giving anybody any rides. I'm just going to be all alone. That's another quiet time for me. So that's how I make the time. For somebody else, it might not work, but for some, it may work.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm getting from you too is that, like, you have to be intentional about carving out time for things that are pleasurable, things that help you reset.
Yes.
Too.
So even in counseling sessions, I've encouraged clients to schedule. That's a strategy in itself. Be purposeful and intentional about what you're doing when it comes to you. Because if you're just going willy-nilly with the wind, then you're going to be caught up and you're going to just be busy doing work, and it's not really benefiting you. So it's important to schedule the time, schedule intimate time, schedule talk time, schedule the times, even set it in your phone. I know people speak about being spontaneous when it comes to pleasure. That is fine. But when you're trying to be practical in a very real life situation, it's important to schedule. Say, hey, this is our time. This is my time. Yeah. So it's important to do that.
Yeah. I saw something, I think, on the internet about scheduling joy. And I 100% hear you, because it's like, when you start to become all of those things, and it feels like everybody wants the 24 hours that you have in the one day. Like, you really have to be like, okay, this 20 minutes is for you. This 20 minutes is for me. This 20 minutes is for us. Like, and you don't necessarily, because I'm somebody who, like, if you start to feel too mundane and too routine, I might be like, I don't know about that. But perhaps you can shift around the order of things. Perhaps, like, things can be flexible in that they don't have to happen the same time every day or the same day every day. But they do happen every day in some way, or they happen every other day. So
you have a mental, you have a mindset that this is what you want, and it's like a ticker in your head. Even if you don't have a hard and fast schedule, mentally, you know, I need this break, and I'm gonna. You're seeking out the opportunities to take that time. So that is important.
How do you think work can support people's ability to create time for pleasure? Because, like, you talked about kind of separating those things, but at any given time, you are still all of those things, right? So, like, when you are at work, nothing stops your children from needing you when you're at work, or your work from perhaps needing you when you are home. I mean, I hope that don't happen, but you know, sometimes I mean, depending on the job that you have, you know, that might sometimes happen. Or, you know, your children might need you when you're with your partner, or your partner might need you when you're with your children, like different things like that. So specifically talking about work and recognizing that people are not just workers and don't just show up as employees. They are people with lives outside of work. How can work support people's ability to create time for pleasure?
Well, one thing I know, and I think it's a practice, and probably should be a practice in most workplaces, is personal days. And I'm not talking about sick days. I know sometimes people speak to sick days as personal days. A sick day cannot be a personal day. A personal day means this is a day I'm choosing to take to do whatever is personal to me.
And that's different to vacation days?
That's different to vacation days. So it allows you to determine what you want to do with those days. Some persons get 6, some persons get 9. But it's important that workplaces create that for their employees, because at least they know and recognize, hey, this is something I can tap into. You know, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I really need to catch up on me. Let me take a day. That day should be available to them. And you recognize too that when employees feel as though they have a say, because sometimes employees don't feel like they have a say, even in their own work life.
Yeah.
But giving employees that autonomy to decide what they want to do with their day and not necessarily have to call in to say, well, to lie.
Yeah,
and
to
say,
lie.
I'm not feeling well today, I'm not going to be in. It really allows the employee to feel as though you care and you value. And once persons feel valued, they tend to produce more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is one way that I would say, or encourage the corporate spaces to empower their employees. That's one way.
Okay. I love that idea of personal days. I don't know. I definitely think it's possible for more workplaces than implement it now. Because, as you said, when people have that time, when people have that autonomy, when people feel like they have agency, they produce better. When people get time to go regroup and come back.
Because you see how people respond after they come back from a vacation. They're full of life, they're vibrant,
they're more creative, they want to change the world.
Correct.
So imagine if they could do that more often, right? And I like the idea of being able to have something where you don't have to lie. Like,
and it don't even have to be a full day. You could request a half personal day. And you do your do, and then you come back out to work.
I just need to rest. Like, nothing is wrong with me. I just need
I'm taking a personal day. That's all you need to communicate. I'm taking a personal day.
Yeah, love that. Let's take a short break here, and then we will come back and continue our conversation on sex and work. Welcome back to Pleasure Pulse. You're joining me and my guest Andrea Watley, and we are talking about sex and work and all of the things in work that can help to make encourage people to find pleasure, support people in finding pleasure and finding joy as working people. So we have talked about, how you found time for pleasure as a working woman and mother and wife, and how you think work can support people's ability to create time for pleasure. Now, I have had recently a few people, especially young people, ask me questions about what is appropriate to wear and do outside of work. Like whether they can wear low-cut blouses, short skirts and dresses, thong bikinis, dance, certain kinds of dance, and so on. Especially the dances that we tend to practice, I want to say cultural dances, but I don't mean like a colo. I mean cultural dances at Juve, and on the Bamsi wall and all of that. Like those cultural dances are what I mean. And I brought this conversation I brought this question into this discussion because I think it relates, right? Because I think people. That's part of people's sexual identity, sexuality, right? Like how they express themselves in clothes, People like to show off, like that's who people are. So how can people make the right decisions for themselves when it comes to retaining their own senses of style, especially at non-work events? Because that's what was like most interesting about the questions to me. Like they weren't asking, what should I wear? Is this appropriate for a work event? They were like, even outside of work, do I have to be mindful about what I wear? So how can people make the right decisions for themselves when it comes to, their sense of style and so on?
When they're outside of work. Well, when it comes to appropriateness, I would encourage self-awareness. Self-awareness and self-respect. When I say self-respect, I'm not referring to shame, right? I'm saying you have to ask yourself if what I'm doing, if it's expressing who I am. That's very important. And it's also important for us to, okay, just like when we're on the job, we present ourselves a particular way because we want to be perceived a particular way. This is how I express myself on the job. Yes, I may be wearing a uniform, but even my very personality tells you who I am. It's the same way on the flip side when we are outside of work. When we dress a particular way, you're saying, this is who I am. It shouldn't be a matter of, okay, no, there's a video gone viral with you know, on the Bam Bam Wall, for example, and now you feel compelled to explain to everybody, or you're feeling some level of shame. The first question I would say to ask, why are you feeling ashamed? If this is really you expressing yourself, why are you being ashamed? And that is where the self-awareness comes in. Sometimes persons do things without really taking into context, and it's important when you are a part of a workspace, and it depends on the workplace as well. You have to fit things into context, because the two are never isolated. They're never, as much as how we say, well, I'm not on the job. The realities are, you are the job, because we get our identities based on what we do. For example, you're here in the radio setting, there are certain expectations of you as a radio host. You know, persons expect you to be jovial, expect you to be lively, even on the outside. Now, I'm an HR professional. What would be the expectation for me as an HR professional? Because that is the identity I'm carrying on the outside. So it's important when it comes to us as a self, as a person, to be mindful of the roles that we have in the corporate space versus what we portray on the outside. So it's a lot of self-awareness to happen. And I recognize too that there's quite a bit of conflict, because the two must be able to marry, else you yourself won't feel comfortable. Then you will be out there providing a lot of explanations for why you were dressed a particular way, doing what you do. And it may be because the two are not married, you know. So it's important. I would encourage persons, be self-aware first. Be sure of what you want to do. Understand that things done in context will require explanations, and be ready to provide that explanations. But if you're not comfortable in providing that explanation, then you need to revisit it and become more self-aware.
Yeah. So there isn't anything like inherently conflicting about,
but only unless the job has that in their in their job description, or the course to say specifically that there are these expectations of you, even your social media platforms, because there are some jobs who have that that you are restricted from participating in certain things,
in certain conversations.
Be mindful. It's about context. It's all about the context.
Like, just like if you work at a particular place, you know, people don't necessarily expect you to come on Facebook under your own name to jump in on certain conversations and so on, right? Because then you are unintentionally, inadvertently representing the company and things like that. So it's like, I think it's also, you know, I mean, we started out, and you started out saying that a lot of these conversations don't happen in work, but I think if they did happen in work and there were spaces to ask questions like these, you know, people could ask these questions like, I like to wear my thong
on the Juve
on parade day, like that is my thing. In this role, working for this company, is that going to be an issue for you? Because that's who I am.
Correct.
And you can also decide okay, well, that is fundamentally who I am. That is extremely important to me. This is something that I am, committed to. So this is not the space for me if this doesn't allow it. So it's like, it's having those conversations, I think. And it's also, like you said, being self-aware and knowing when you're doing something. Because I think most workplaces, like, it neither here nor there.
Yeah.
For them it's like you go out, you enjoy yourself, especially something like music fest, like Carnival, where such a huge part of our population participates in it. It's like you expect to see your co-workers on the street, like dancing and stuff, because you're gonna be there too.
And then it goes back to context. Right? It's because let's say there's an isolated situation and you just walk down the road in your thong. Then somebody will call for you and say, something wrong with Roma.
Very true.
So it depends on the context. It's very important to establish that. And it's also important for persons to wear their brand, meaning you work for a particular company, you're representing that company's brand. But outside of work, what is your brand? And so when you represent your brand, you're able to be in the company. You're not shortchanging yourself because you are your brand. And I find that because persons haven't established who they are, what their brand is, then they're over here with this brand, and then they take on, and then they have to end up providing a lot of explanations because
everybody.
they did not establish who they are. So that is really important.
Okay, I hear that. So taking that in mind, and I guess like considering what I said, about, and what we said about these conversations happening more in workplaces, how do you think employers can foster a culture where employees feel safe and respected regarding their sexuality? And I'll also extend that to sexual orientation and things like that, but just regarding their sexuality in general.
So I'm of the view that it starts at the top. So it starts with leadership, it starts with the managers, helping them to embrace different expressions of identity. Now, all of us may have our biases, we have our beliefs, but it's important that we recognize that they are ours.
Yes.
Right? And so, in doing that, when you recognize that your biases are yours, you don't necessarily put them onto somebody else, and that is where we earn and we develop respect for each other, because then we recognize you are an individual and I'm an individual. We can coexist in this space without the biases, because guess what, if you're employed as a clerk and your sexual orientation is not, I don't necessarily agree, not that you asked if I agree or not, but that is my bias. What does that have to do with you being a clerk? You were employed, you were interviewed, it has to be that you pass, that's why you're here. So the question should be, how does your orientation affect this operation? And that is what managers, management, that is what they have to first consider. It starts there, quelling all those biases, because staff look to leadership for responses, and based on how leadership responds, then the rest of the staff responds the same way. So if you have leadership that is, we practice the DEIs, then you'll recognize that it flows down, and then everybody is respected. You respect the identities. You don't necessarily have to agree, but we have goals. We have these corporate goals. Let's hit these goals and go home. So that is where I think workplaces need to start. Start with management, create those awarenesses, have those hard conversations, because sometimes too, persons do have a hard time dealing with different sexual orientations. And I do believe too that there's a time and place for everything. And I'm saying that to say, I'm married. I wouldn't necessarily come around and sing it to everybody. Oh, I'm married. See, I'm married. It's the same way. This is my identity. I don't have to free it up. So it goes both ways. I think it's important. It goes back to the self-awareness. You know you're owning your brand. You're comfortable with your brand. So you proceed. And once we're all doing that in our own, pockets and then we come together, we'll be fine. So it goes back down to education, creating that awareness within the spaces.
And this is just a follow-up question. What, like, have you seen examples where leaders or employers don't model inclusion? And what happens? What happens in instances where employers don't model inclusion or inclusive practices?
So that's twofold, because the employee who they say leadership displays their biases, the employee first of all feels rejected. They don't feel as though they belong. And then too, the remainder of the team will feed from management, from leadership. There will have to be a strong team to say, hey, that was wrong. But it's very, very few.
Yeah, because you're trying to keep your job.
Yeah, you're trying to keep your job, so you're gonna toe the same line, right? And that is why it's important for leadership to be very mindful. It happens all the time, and not even just with sexuality. It happens with other things. Let's say, for example, the color of your hair, how you dress. There's so many piercings.
Tattoos.
There's so many different things that leadership have a lot of work to do.
They do. I remember I had a job years ago. I am in the job. I have been hired. I see I got my little nose ring, which I think, like some people, I think people are used to it by now. I've had it for years. But perhaps when I first got it, or when people first saw me with it, I remember one of a member of leadership at the institution was like, are you going to teach your classes with that nose ring? And I was just like, you hire me? I came to the interview with the nose ring. I applied for the job with my nose ring, so the students will see me with my nose ring.
So you see where we started?
Yeah.
It started from recruitment.
Yeah.
So these things should have been expressed.
But she wasn't in the recruitment. She wasn't part of it. So the people who recruited me obviously had no issue with it. But she, at a different level, had her personal issues with it, which is why, I think, it's important. That's why policies and so are
important.
Yeah, because to check people's power and people's individual preferences, opinions, biases, and things like that. Because sometimes they really do have. In my case, I was like, you can't do that, but in some cases, they are drastic. Outcomes.
There is a shift happening because the traditional workspace is no longer traditional.
Yeah.
And so we have non-traditional workspaces with very traditional leadership, right? And I'm of the view that education, training is very important. And sometimes persons respond in ignorance. Like there's a story of this lady where she used to tie the ham up in the house or something like that. And every generation come down tying up the ham in the house, and nobody ever asks why you keep tying the ham up in the house. And the reason for that was because they don't want the animals to come in and eat the ham. But the same thing with leadership, traditional leadership. They do things a particular way because it worked for a particular time.
Yeah.
But times are now changing. Not saying that morally or ethically, let's use the word ethical, ethically things are changed, but it's just that the individuals, the way of doing things have changed. And so leadership have to change with it as well.
Yeah.
And working with helping those biases and changing of biases come with education.
Yeah.
I can't go away from that. Because persons behave
as a teacher,
persons behave out of ignorance. So once we move from that level of ignorance, we should be in a better place.
And ignorance as in not knowing.
Not knowing.
Not ignorance.
Like I know culturally ignorance is an insult. Ignorance here means you don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what would you say workplaces can do to support sexual health education and resources for their employees? Do you think that there is a space for that? And if you think so, yeah, how can workplaces incorporate that?
Workplaces can encourage this through their EAP programs if they have. And if they don't, I want to encourage, if you're a top boss of any institution, to incorporate an employee assistance program in your companies. It's very important. Where I work, we have one, and it's very functional. Employees access it because it's a safe space for them where they can come and share confidential information, get information that they need to help them make the right decisions, make the right choices. And it's not just for staff level, it goes right up to management. So that is something that companies can do to help even with these conversations, because you can come in and say, I'm having a hard time at home, I need help because it's affecting my productivity now on the job. Employees need to feel safe in their workspaces because they're there for most of the waking hours, 8 to 9 hours out of the day. They're giving us most of their time. It's important that we have that safe space for them, and also develop a level of trust where persons can be themselves, because the realities are they don't leave themselves at the door. When they come to work, they're coming with everything, right? So it's important for companies to create that space for them through different employee assistance program, whether you want to do one internally or one externally. There are resources here in St. Kitts that can provide an external employee assistance program, or do it internal.
Can you tell me more about that? Like, what is it? Is it a space employees can access funding? Is it counseling?
With the employee assistance program, it provides mental health counseling, financial management counseling. You can get testing, whether in-house, and if the counselors in-house cannot provide that level of testing for you, we provide, or we outsource. So we seek out the persons who can help our staff members and pay for it so that they can access those services.
Like testing for mental health.
Whether it's ADHD, anything along that line. So the purpose of the employee assistance program is to help them holistically, whereas when you're doing training and development, that's for work. But the employee assistance program is more personal. So you know for sure once they're accessing that service, it's for them and not necessarily for the company. It's the company helping them to be better, and then they can eventually help the company with productivity.
Got you.
So that's something that I think, as a former educator, that's something I wish was in place for teachers, because that's something they needed. I work closely with JNF in providing services to some of their nurses, so I know that that's a need. I'm not certain about the police, but these professionals are the people who need the employee assistance program. So hopefully they're hearing me. All of the stakeholders who can do, will do,
and
employee assistance. Yes, Roma and I are here.
Okay. That makes, I think, a lot of sense. Now, and we are wrapping up, of course, the time has flown as usual. When I did my master's research paper on women's sexual agency, one of the things that repeatedly came up was the shift to motherhood and partnership, and how that affected, typically reduced time available for pleasure. What tips, as an end to the show, would you give to parents, working people who are in relationships, or even single people trying to find love, about making time for pleasure?
So when it comes to our couples, I want to encourage you to communicate. Speak using words. Don't assume that your partner knows.
Don't be like.
Don't assume. Use your words to verbalize your needs, because Just like when you're hungry for food, you need to say to your partner, this is what I need, because it's critical to the relationship. So that is very important. When it comes to parents, now parents, we have to make time. As a mother, I'm telling you, we have to make time. These children will take all of the time that we have to give and leave us with nothing.
And will.
Yes.
As a child.
So we have to be intentional. Shut the door. Put a sign. Do not disturb. Or only call if the house is burning down. Like, just make it hard and fast. Or make it a rule. When you see this door closed, don't knock on it. Right? But we have to be intentional. As parents, I know sometimes we feel guilty, especially as mothers. We feel guilty, like a level of guilt, like giving up the child for the man. But it doesn't have to be that way. All for yourself. You have to make time. And then the singles now, who may be waiting for that relationship to say, hey, I want to access that joy. You also need to prioritize yourself. You need to make time to figure out what makes you happy. What is giving you joy? Because if you're going to then say, you know what, I'm going to wait for that time, then you may never know, because then you may limit it to just a sexual experience. And then when you have the experience, it's not as fulfilling. So it's important for you to learn what makes you happy, what gives you that joy, what gives you that pleasure. So it's make time for our single. Our singles need to make time, explore what brings you joy. Our parents out there, I'm saying make time to, carve out even a 15 minutes. It works. And then for the couples, communicate. I tell my couples all the time, how do you expect her to know? How do you expect him to know? Because they often say, well, he see, or he will. No. Communicate. Say it using words. Just like I tell my son, use your words. I tell my son, use your words to express yourself. It's important to use your words.
I love what you said about like communication, because I often talk about the 2 big C's for pleasure: communication and consent. And I also like really appreciate everything else that you said, including as a single person making time to learn yourself and learn what brings you pleasure. And I remember one of my participants talked about like not necessarily scheduling something, but saying we got 10 minutes or saying we got 15 minutes
or even 5 minutes.
We got 5 minutes, whatever. We driving home, turn down this turn down this road.
You have to be creative. Like, don't lose yourself in work, in the children, in your friends, in everything else. You have to keep at it. It takes work.
Can you lose? Should you lose yourself in yourself? I don't know what that means, but I was just like,
if you can lose yourself in yourself? If you lose yourself in you, then you might be left all alone.
So don't forget everybody else. Don't forget everybody in the process. But don't forget you either.
Yeah, because we are made up of everything around us, and that is a reality. So when we begin to exclude everything else around us, then
we need people.
Yes, we do.
Don't neglect your children
no.
for your partner.
No.
Don't neglect your partner for your children.
Correct.
And don't neglect yourself for everybody else. So
that's
find there are ways to schedule pleasure.
Be creative.
There are ways to find joy in little things, to not see things as something that you have to do, but see things as something you get to do. People say that about exercise, and movement, that seeing it like is something that you get to do, not something that you have to do. Like a reframe, I can't say it's ever worked for me, but perhaps it might work for somebody listening. Like, I get to spend time with you. I got to spend this time with you. Of course, I do host Pleasure Pulse, so it's something I do every Tuesday, consistently, but I also get to talk to people in a way that I wouldn't usually get to talk to them, right?
And
so
that's
it's like, and that brings me pleasure,
Good.
and that brings me joy, and I wish that for everybody listening, right? Like, I hope that, you know, you see yourselves as people beyond the work, and that you are able to find ways to tap into the pleasure that keeps you going, to find pleasure in the work that you do, to take little breaks in work to do pleasurable things. And some of that for you might be talking to, you know, your bestie at work or whatever. You know, it might be starting another little project at work that's not necessarily related to your job there. You know, it could be all sorts of things, but I encourage that. But you know, before I wrap up, would you do you want to end with any final words?
Yeah, so I had a note here that says, in a world that demands productivity, claiming joy is a radical act. Therefore, pleasure is a protest, right? You have to push for pleasure. Self-respect isn't about modesty or exposure, because self-respect is relative to the self, right? But it's more about owning your choices, right? Work should fit into our lives, not take over our lives. And then the last thing is, don't wait for the perfect time to enjoy your life. Find moments, tiny or bold, to reconnect with yourself. So, to those listening, I know we have tons of work to do, but it's important to make the time for you. Okay?
Love that. Okay, I will leave you all there. I won't see you all next Tuesday because it's a holiday. But I hope you all have fun at Culturama. That will be a moment for you, you know, to create pleasure, to find pleasure. I hope you, even if you don't go to Culturama, spend, you know, take some, spend personal time. Go frolic on the lawn, like go do something nice that is something that, you know, brings you joy. Have some nice sex, like whatever it is. So I will see you all the following Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This conversation. And as usual, I will wish you all a pleasurable evening, and I will say good night.
Good night. Bye.